Every one of these crewmen is buried here with the ship. Dear Tim and Moby, I heard Pearl Harbor was the biggest surprise attack ever. Did America really not see it coming? Melanie. It's true, Melanie. December 7th, 1941 was a quiet morning at the U.S. Naval Base in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. The USS Nevada's band was starting its daily rendition of the Star-Spangled Banner. Some of the musicians got distracted by explosions in the distance. Target practice, they figured, or maybe a drill. Most everyone at the base assumed the same thing. On the band's final notes, the deck was sprayed with gunfire. The whole sky darkened with planes bearing the Japanese rising sun. They unleashed a fury of bombs, gunfire, and torpedoes. Our most powerful vessels, the battleships, were the main target. All 8 were hit, with the worst blast shredding the USS Arizona. More than 1,000 men went down with the sinking ship. There was no time to mount a defense, and the United States suffered a huge defeat. But it's not like the attack came as a complete surprise. For years, Japan had been waging an imperialist campaign. They were taking over territories in East Asia, creating an empire. In the decade or so before the attack, its size had increased more than 10 times. The wealth and resources from these areas were poured back into Japan's war machine, and that let them expand even more. Eventually, Japan's ambition to conquer all of Asia crossed the line. Its army slaughtered thousands of Chinese civilians in the Nanjing Massacre. The world was outraged, but nobody wanted to get involved in a far-off war. Well, the U.S. was caught up in the Great Depression. The economic slump demanded most of the government's attention, and the losses of World War I were still fresh in Americans' minds. President Roosevelt promised to use peaceful means for dealing with Japan. Instead of resorting to force, Roosevelt tried restricting trade. America was still supplying Japan with most of its oil and steel. An embargo halting the shipments might stop Japan's military machine. Roosevelt also demanded an immediate withdrawal from China. Nope, Japan simply decided to get their raw materials elsewhere. And in 1940, they made a pact with Germany and Italy, forming the Axis powers. Japan was now involved in World War II, which had begun in Europe the year before. Publicly, Japan and the U.S. still expressed hope of avoiding open warfare. They even held talks to negotiate a peace treaty. Behind closed doors, Japan's military leaders were hatching a different plan. Their prime minister, General Hideki Tojo, wanted to attack first. A preemptive strike could decimate America's Pacific Fleet. Japan would take the upper hand in a battle that seemed inevitable. Their head of state, Emperor Hirohito, had his doubts. But Tojo and his top admirals had made up their minds. Japan began secret preparations for the Pearl Harbor attack. Their pilots and sailors didn't even know what they were training for. But at dawn, on a tranquil Sunday, their mission was made clear. Over 300 Japanese fighter planes headed toward the Hawaiian base, just as American servicemen were starting their morning routines. Most servicemen had no time to get to their posts and defend the base. But there were some amazing feats of bravery that day. 2 off-duty pilots made it to their airfield before the Japanese bombers. They flew into the fray and shot down 6 enemy planes. Actually, Moby, it was just a drop in the bucket. Most U.S. fighters were destroyed before anyone could get to them. In just over 2 hours, Pearl Harbor was in ruins, with 2,400 Americans dead. It was one of the most devastating defeats in American history. Despite their lopsided victory, Japan made one huge miscalculation. They thought the fight would break America's spirit, undermining our will to fight. But, inspired by FDR, the public demanded action. Roosevelt called December 7, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. Within a week, Congress declared war on all the Axis powers. The United States had officially entered World War II on the side of the Allied nations. Pearl Harbor severely weakened our Pacific naval forces. Japan immediately invaded territories America could no longer defend. It was months before the U.S. fleet was totally restored, and a year before ground troops managed to take back a single island. By the war's end in 1945, millions of people had died in the Pacific, and 2 Japanese cities had been destroyed by nuclear weapons. But Pearl Harbor's consequences were felt on the home front, too. Japanese Americans, particularly on the West Coast, were targets of racist policies. Their loyalty to the United States was questioned. Roosevelt forced hundreds of thousands of these American citizens into internment camps. They lived in shabby conditions under the constant watch of guards. Their livelihoods were ruined and their property seized, never to be returned. Yeah, wartime fears often bring out the worst in people, even while the stress of battle is bringing out the best in others. Like Samuel Fuqua, who led dozens of Arizona crewmen to safety. Afterward, he pulled sailors from the water while bombs were still dropping. That tragic day is filled with similar stories of grace under pressure. After World War II, America developed deep economic and cultural ties with Japan. They're now our closest ally in East Asia. And December 7th, 1941, is not so much a day of infamy, but a time to pay respects to old adversaries and to recognize our shared losses.
Good morning, Kootenai Pirates, and happy Wednesday. Today is December 7th, Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day. For lunch today is Sloppy Joe's on a bun. If you don't want a Sloppy Joe, you can order a hot cheese sandwich on a Wednesday. Some reminders, speaking of lunch, remember, students, when you're in the cafeteria, it's your cafeteria. You need to take good care of it. The adults in the room are there to help you. They are not there to help pick up after you. Please make sure when you're done eating, you walk your tray, if you're having hot lunch, to the cleaning station, which is that gray cart next to the window. Make sure you throw away your paper products. Pour your liquid in the white buckets next to the trash cans. Please keep food out of those buckets. They're just for liquid. And make sure you look around. Pick up any food trash, lunch boxes, gloves, and hats that you have left over. You guys over the past couple weeks are just leaving those behind, and the adults in the room are having to pick up after you. That would be very helpful if you could double check your table before you leave. Thank you so much for your help with that. Also, another reminder, when you're going out to the playground, please stay on the sidewalk in the quiet corridor. Do not walk off the quiet corridor in the snow near the windows. Students are learning in classrooms while you're out to recess. And also, it is not safe because snow slides off our roof. It is designed so that snow slides off the roof, and we don't want any students to get hurt. So it is super important that you stay on the sidewalk in the quiet corridor. One last reminder about outside. The snow on the playground and on the sides of the school, like if you're waiting in the morning to come in or you're waiting after school for parent pickup, please do not eat that snow. We use ice melt here at Kootenai Elementary School, and although it is the safest form of ice melt, it is still not a good idea to eat that. It is not food, so please do not eat the snow at Kootenai Elementary School. It is, I know it's tempting, but it has chemicals in it that are not meant to be ingested. Please don't eat snow at Kootenai Elementary School. Do that when you are off campus and you know places that don't use ice melt. All right, now for the fun stuff. Our collection for cause is in its final days. Tomorrow is the last day that classrooms can bring donations to see who wins the party. Right now, in third place with $131.23 is Miss Williams' class. In second place, her sister, Mrs. Reichart, with $183.58. And a huge lead over everyone, Miss Sandel's class is hanging on with $260.30. As a school, we have raised over $1,000. We're at $1,376.16. And as you heard, we do get outside donations, but it does take about $4,000 to feed our Kootenai families and help them out over Christmas. So any amount that you can help contribute to that overall budget would be wonderful. So you can bring that money in. Tomorrow is the very last day. And thank you. Every single classroom has had a contribution. Thank you so much for contributing to that. And I encourage everyone to bring in donations. Tomorrow is the last day. Don't forget. All right. Shout outs. Shout out to Isaac Good for playing with Nico at library very patiently and politely from Miss K. Shout out to Saffron because you're being very nice to me from Faye. And shout out to Lane for helping me get up when I fell from Noah. Those are great shout outs. All right, Kootenai Pirates, have the best Wednesday ever. You may now stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.